They're about to start calling me 12-hour sports. But on a serious note, today I want to talk about 5 things that I'm watching for in the preseason matchup on Friday against the New York Giants from the Detroit Lions. And I think that we are in tune for a very good one, because usually when I record at these times, whether it be 11:36 right now as it is, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., that is usually when I get in my rhythm, when I get in that groove and talk about these teams. And I think that coming from a perspective of a guy who covers multiple teams in different sports, now coming back to the Detroit Lions, it has been a minute since I've talked about this team. But like I said, with that, I'm watching every little detail, and I've watched a lot of things. So understanding, even after these joint practices, I'm up on it. And I think that number one, starting this list off, is the draft class. That is what I'm most excited to watch. Now, understand, as I list these things, it will not be in order, but I'm talking about what I'm most excited for. That is the draft class, because Jamir Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, Sam LaPorta, Broderick Martins, Antoine Greens, all of those guys. I think that now I want to see who rises to the crop, and kind of some of the things that Dan Campbell was talking about. He said that with a rookie, you kind of have to expect the lumps, because we go out in joint practices. You're playing a guy who you've never seen. You don't know his tendencies. You didn't get to scout him at all. So he does different things, and really your talent has to shine in a situation like that. Your technique has to shine in a situation like that. And Sam LaPorta being good in those 2 joint practices, that's something that I take real high value into, because seeing it, like I've always said with tight ends, rookie tight ends especially, they don't flash. But I think that coming from Iowa, some of the things that I've looked more into with the pro-style offense that they have at Iowa, some of those implications in there. So now he has an easier step when translating into the NFL, and how Jared Goff talks about this guy, how he's become, basically, I think it's safe to say throughout the duration of training camp, a close second. We know Amon-Ra St. Brown is the guy who's getting all the targets. He's the first look. I think if you want to get a first down, you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown. But if we talk about a close second, understanding J-Mo missing the first 6 games, I think you can kind of look at this guy alongside with Khalif Raymond, Marvin Jones Jr., even Jamir Gibbs from what we're seeing. But Sam LaPorta has been in that mixture, and that's just a testament to everything he's learned from the head coach at Iowa, from the offensive coordinator, tight ends coach, and the work that they put in there in the process in film study. So he's looking like he's ready. I do not know what the production level will be, but I will tell you, it's going to be different from what we usually see from rookie tight ends. And really, that's more with the draft class. Jamir Gibbs. Some of the catches that I've seen from Jamir Gibbs, and not even just the catches, the route running and the precision in the route running. I saw the route against Bobby Orike. It is special. It truly is special. And I think that even watching Inside the Den with Brad Holmes and everything he talked about, he does not see a running back. I don't even know. I think I'm scared. I think if I say Jamir Gibbs is a running back at this point, Detroit Lions fan base may attack me. They may jump me if I call him a running back, because he catches the football so much, and that's really where he's splashed. Now, he's had some runs, but in the receiving game, I think he's just been a menace. So I talk about what are the expectations for a guy like Jamir Gibbs, and I think you have to look at scrimmage yards rather than total rush yards when comparing him to the other running backs, and I think he'll have a really good season there. Now, the next guy I'm going to talk about, also, we're going to get into this next topic with an interesting guy, but I want to touch on Brian Branch real quick, because I'm seeing him getting reps with the ones, and I understand, yes, I know. I've been on it. Aaron Glenn says it's a rep chart, not a depth chart. This is something I've talked about since the beginning of training camp, and you want to see guys get looks against different teams. So because Brian Branch is running with the ones, that does not necessarily guarantee he's going to be a starter. But like I said, if it were up to me, and I was a guy who did the mock drafts, I scouted out all these players, I said it. Even for my Pittsburgh Steelers, I was looking heavily at 17. If Broderick Martin was not on that board, Brian Branch, you add a guy like that into the defense, because, yes, he's a nickel corner, but he's a football player. Understand, some teams draft players, not positions. Brad Holmes drafts players, not positions. So having a guy who I think, out of this entire draft class, top 15 player, not defender, top 15 player regardless of position. What he did for Nick Saban. You start as a freshman for Nick Saban. You play that star position for Nick Saban. I've said plenty of these things before, but I'm saying them again to reiterate. I would start Brian Branch in that nickel position. And I say that because C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I understand, yes, he can play nickel. Yes, Tracy Walker can kick back and play alongside Kirby Joseph. But I say that because C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a ball hawk. And if you let him roam the field, he's going to get you turnovers. And that's not to say Tracy Walker is not going to be a guy who doesn't get snaps, but understanding you can mix and match these guys, and that's something we're going to talk about within this list. Like I said, this is really one of the deep dives that I usually do with this team, so we're going to get there, and we're going to talk about Tracy and Kirby and those guys, but I think Brian Branch has to be on that field first. I think he's that type of player. I think he's that type of impact player. I think Jacksonville, if they did not have the tackle situation with Anton Harrison, I think that is a team that could have used them. Plenty of teams in the first round could have used Brian Branch, can cover. We've seen the pass breakups. We're seeing some picks. We're seeing the tackling ability at the line of scrimmage. I can make a whole video about Brian Branch, but I'm not going to do that here. So, talking about him and the last guy in this draft class, that's Jack Campbell. And talking about Jack Campbell, I have not heard much. And I've been looking, and really I think the biggest play that I've heard was the chase down fumble recovery. And I forgot who was carrying that rock right there. But he had a chase down fumble recovery down the field, went and got that. And then I believe he also recovered it. So that was a big time play showing his hustle and his pursuit to the football. But did not hear much about Jack Campbell up to this point, even in the joint practices. So now Jack Campbell, I think that it's really that type of maturation process, but we're just not seeing it yet. So I think that with him, we're transitioning to number 2, the linebacker core. You know it was coming. To being a guy who's played linebacker formerly, I think that now I love defense, but I love linebackers, and I'm always have that love. And Derek Barnes, I told you, when Jack Campbell was drafted, Derek Barnes, Alex Anzalone, texted their linebackers coach and Kelvin Shepard. They wanted to know, what does this mean for us? And I think with Alex Anzalone, he's still getting those first team reps, and I'm seeing him making plays as well. But seeing Derek Barnes and his progression, and what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing is that his instincts, we know that he's a very athletic guy. Like I said, I want to see this with the film. So that's why I'm really keying in on that linebacker core, because I think Alex Anzalone, kind of the veteran in that room, understanding that he has some very high highs and some very low lows, but right now he has the edge over these guys. So Derek Barnes, Jack Campbell, and Malcolm Rodriguez, I want to see the 3. And I believe they're all going to get snaps in the preseason. So that's what I'm keeping my eyes on with number 2. Number 3, that's the undrafted rookies, and that's really Starlin Thomas, Dylan Drummond. I'm hearing a lot of things out of those 2 guys. And Starlin Thomas, a guy who I talked about, I believe, in the first training camp video that I made, talking about him and the impact he's making as a corner. Now, along with Will Harris, Jerry Jacobs, Cam Sutton, some guys in that secondary, he's making plays, and really a lot of plays with the second team. But understand, those are still valuable reps, and keep doing it. Keep stacking it. So that's why I want to see that in the preseason, because who knows what the ceiling is. It's been a lot of undrafted guys who've made impacts on teams. So we say it's early. I'm not swinging one way. I'm not swinging this way. I'm not saying he's a superstar. I'm not saying he's a bust. I won't make the 53. I'm staying in the middle, even keel. I want to see it in preseason to get some big time action. Now, Dylan Drummond, I've heard from Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, everybody is really on the Dylan Drummond train. And I think he's a guy that's pushing to make the 53. Now, understand, with the backing of that receiving core, it's some real interesting things. And that's going to take me into number 4, talking about this receiving core. Because I say that Dylan Drummond, really in my 3rd point, getting into my 4th, Jared Goff says he's a guy that always makes the right plays. He's always in the right place. He's building that trust. And I think that's the biggest thing with a guy. You say Jared Goff, Ben Johnson, if we want a guy who, if our depth, if a starter gets hurt, we understand Jamison Williams, first 6 games suspended. Marvin Jones Jr., he's a bit older at this stage in his career. Khalif Raymond, pretty solid guy, but I think Dylan Drummond can add different things because he plays multiple positions. Dan Campbell and Jared Goff were talking about it. He's learning the X, he's learning the Z, he's learning the Y, different types of things, playing inside out, having that versatility, and I want to see it in preseason. I think they're going to use him in different alignments, different places, even in motion packages, just to see what all he can do. We kind of know to this point what he can do, but want to see it on film. Put it on tape. We're going to break it down here, and we're going to talk about it. So a guy I'm keeping my eye on, and really with this receiving core, I think that a big thing I would say with Dylan Drummond, with a guy like Khalif Raymond, with some of the guys in the back half of this depth chart, and Denzel Mims, another guy who we're keeping our eye on, I think that it's some real interesting things. Now, I want to pull up this depth chart real quick to talk about this point, really, because getting into it, I think it's a very interesting team, because we understand when J-Mo gets back, some things are going to change with the receiving core, even with the entire offense. But right here, I want to talk about this set of guys that I see on my list: Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, Denzel Mims, Trinity Benson, Maurice Alexander, Trey Quinn, another guy who was brought in. So you look at this and you see Antoine Green, Dylan Drummond. I think that is kind of packed at this back end. And like I said, I think that all of these guys have made plays, but we want to see who's the most consistent right now. It's not to say because, Antoine Green goes out and have a good day, or really Denzel Mims. He's been dealing with some other things, so hasn't been able to practice as much as some of these other guys. So does that not give him the edge? I don't think we can say that. I think you continue to see it in preseason, continue to see what happens, and then when the cuts come, we'll be able to fully assess this receiving core. But like I said, it's still early, so I want to see it right now in preseason. Some interesting guys. Again, I'm going to give you those names again that I'm looking at. Like I said, Mims, Maurice Alexander, Trey Quinn, Chase Coda, Antoine Green, and our guy, Dylan Drummond. Now, getting into the last point, I think that I've talked with a lot of subscribers and a lot of Detroit Lions fans about this point, and I think that I can't say it enough, because what I've heard in training camp against the New York Giants, different packages, and really a lot of times it was nickel packages. When I'm talking about different personnel groupings, different fronts, switching out of that 4 to the 5 man. And when you got a guy like Josh Paschal, yes, Josh Paschal, I'm bringing him up because I think that him along with John Kaminsky, understanding that, to me, I think that Josh Paschal is really a more athletic version of a John Kaminsky. And you probably say, what does that even mean? I think that bigger defensive end who can kind of be versatile inside out. Now, he's not a true inside player. John Kaminsky is a tad bit bigger, but when I look at them, I see a guy who can stunt. He can be the crasher, but he can also be the loop player. So it's different types of things we can do. And with that athleticism, gives him a higher ceiling on the edge. So when we have a guy who has high ceiling on the edge, being a power rusher, I think it's a lot of things to look at with Josh Paschal. Like I said, do not know how much reps these guys are going to get, but I think that with Charles Harris kind of having a nod is what I'm seeing on the unofficial depth chart. I think that you have to see them all. Because even James Houston, we haven't been hearing the James Houston quote-unquote hype like I've been seeing on film, like I talked about so far. I don't think that has been the case just yet. But understand, I think he's taking on a bit of a different role. We see some of in the 3-3-5 packages, he's dropping back into the Sam. So we're kind of still figuring out where he best fits on this team. But it's different types of things. Like I said, if you want to run a base 4-2-5, you could still get into the 3-3-5 out of that with a guy like James Houston. He can line up at the 5, at the 4-eye, at the 4, depending on the package. And I understand if it's first, second down, I'm not lining him up at a 4-eye. But if it's third and long, if it's those types of situations, I can kind of get tricky with his alignment. And then we can also drop him back. So now we're getting a 4-2-5 look initially, but understanding Aaron Glenn, it's a lot of different things he's going to want to do. And really being an aggressive defense, this is something that can play to your advantage, because now you have James Houston lined up in that alignment on the ball, and then he drops back pre-snap or post-snap. So different types of things. Even Charles Harris, he's been working on getting more comfortable, dropping back into that Sam role. And like I said, at Missouri, he was a guy who played a little bit in space and getting more comfortable with that. I don't think it's nothing new to him, but I think it's something that at the next level in the NFL, he has to get more accustomed to it at this level. So, like I said, it's a lot of interesting things, even with the 5-2 front. 5-2, I mean, different things you could do with the linebackers. We want to see, like I said, I don't know how many 3 linebacker sets these guys will use, but I think something that I'm keeping my eye on is, are you going to add an extra safety in? And I'm talking about with Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell, Derek Barnes, whoever you decide to keep on the field, will you take out that second linebacker and add a safety? It's something that in certain situations, this has to be like a dime package. You can't do it often, but I think it's something you can have in the playbook, because you have different pass rushes. You have talented players who can cover. The understanding on these rundowns, first and second, like I said, we don't want to play too much, but we get into a third and long situation. I can still kick in CJ. I can still kick in Brian Branch. And then possibly, if anything, I could take off a defensive lineman and then bring in Tracy Walker back to have that 4 safety set with 2 corners. Or we could bring in another corner and then switch Brian Branch, or bring down CJ, kick back Tracy. Different types of things you can do with the defense. I think it's a very deep secondary. I think right now what I'm seeing and what I've heard out of the joint practices and kind of training camp, they're still catching on a bit to this system and to the scheme, but overall, I think it'll be a pretty, now anything's better than last year. Anything's better than last year, but I think it's a good group of guys who can work with one another. I do not see that elite shut down, traveling corner, but sometimes in different schemes, you don't need that. Understanding if these guys play as a unison, play as one, they'll be all right in the back end. So seeing that, Aiden Hutchinson, I got my eyes on these 5 things, and I'm going to reiterate them before I get out of here. The draft class, the linebacker core, the undrafted rookies, Starlin Thomas, Dylan Drummond, the receiving core, and the defensive personnel groups. So if you made it this far in the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We can always have these discussions in the comments. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you for watching, and now we out.